him and the poor young maiden. But an even more unpleasant surprise was in store for our hero, for whilst the lady was still yawning as Chichikov recounted to her certain of his past adventures, and also touched lightly upon the subject of Greek philosophy, there appeared from an adjoining room the figure of Nozdrev. Whether he had come from the buffet, or whether he had issued from a little green retreat where a game more strenuous than whist had been in progress, or whether he had left the latter resort unaided, or whether he had been expelled therefrom, is unknown. But at all events, when he entered the ballroom, he was in an elevated condition, and leading by the arm the public prosecutor, whom he seemed to have been dragging about for a long while past, seeing that the poor man was glancing from side to side as though seeking a means of putting an end to this personally conducted tour. Certainly he must have found the situation almost unbearable, in view of the fact that, after deriving inspiration from 2 glasses of tea not wholly undiluted with rum, Nozdrev was engaged in lying unmercifully. On sighting him in the distance, Chichikov at once decided to sacrifice himself. That is to say, he decided to vacate his present enviable position and make off with all possible speed, since he could see that an encounter with the newcomer would do him no good. Unfortunately, at that moment, the governor buttonholed him with a request that he would come and act as arbiter between him, the governor, and 2 ladies, the subject of dispute being the question as to whether or not women's love is lasting. Simultaneously, Nozdrev descried our hero, and bore down upon him. "Ah, my fine landowner of Kherson," he cried with a smile which set his fresh spring-rose pink cheeks a-quiver. "Have you been doing much trade in departed souls lately?" With that he turned to the governor. "I suppose your Excellency knows that this man traffics in dead peasants," he bawled. "Look here, Chichikov, I tell you in the most friendly way possible that everyone here likes you, yes, including even the governor. Nevertheless, had I my way, I would hang you. Yes, by God, I would." Chichikov's discomfiture was complete. "And would you believe it, your Excellency," went on Nozdrev, "but this fellow actually said to me, 'Sell me your dead souls.' Why, I laughed till I nearly became as dead as the souls. And behold, no sooner do I arrive here than I am told that he has bought 3,000,000 rubles worth of peasants for transferment. For transferment, indeed, and he wanted to bargain with me for my dead ones. Look here, Chichikov, you are a swine. Yes, by God, you are an utter swine. Is that not so, your Excellency? Is that not so, friend Procurator?" Public Prosecutor. But both His Excellency, the Public Prosecutor, and Chichikov were too taken aback to reply. The half-tipsy Nozdrev, without noticing them, continued his harangue as before. "Ah, my fine sir," he cried, "this time I don't mean to let you go. No, not until I have learned what all this purchasing of dead peasants means. Look here, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Yes, I say that I, who am one of your best friends—" Here he turned to the governor again. "Your Excellency," he continued, "you would never believe what inseparables this man and I have been. Indeed, if you had stood there and said to me, 'Nozdrev, tell me on your honor which of the 2 you love best, your father or Chichikov,' I should have replied, 'Chichikov, by God.'" With that he tackled our hero again. "Come, come, my friend," he urged, "let me imprint upon your cheeks a baser or 2. You will excuse me if I kiss him, will you not, your Excellency? No, do not resist me, Chichikov, but allow me to imprint at least 1 baser upon your lily-white cheek." And in his efforts to force upon Chichikov what he termed his basers, he came near to measuring his length upon the floor. Everyone now edged away, and turned a deaf ear to his further babblings. But his words on the subject of the purchase of dead souls had none the less been uttered at the top of his voice, and been accompanied with such uproarious laughter that the curiosity even of those who had happened to be sitting or standing in the remoter corners of the room had been aroused. So strange and novel seemed the idea that the company stood with faces expressive of nothing but a dumb, dull wonder. Only some of the ladies, as Chichikov did not fail to remark, exchanged meaning, ill-natured winks and a series of sarcastic smiles, which circumstance still further increased his confusion. That Nozdrev was a notorious liar everyone of course knew, and that he should have given vent to an idiotic outburst of this sort had surprised no one. But a dead soul? Well, what was one to make of Nozdrev's reference to such a commodity? Naturally, this unseemly contretemps had greatly upset our hero, for however foolish be a madman's words, they may yet prove sufficient to sow doubt in the minds of saner individuals. He felt much as does a man who, shod with well-polished boots, has just stepped into a dirty, stinking puddle. He tried to put away from him the occurrence, and to expand and to enjoy himself once more. Nay, he even took a hand at whist. But all was of no avail. Matters kept going as awry as a badly bent hoop. Twice he blundered in his play, and the president of the council was at a loss to understand how his friend Paul Ivanovitch, lately so good and so circumspect a player, could perpetrate such a mauvais pas as to throw away a particular king of spades, which the president had been trusting, as, to quote his own expression, he would have trusted God. At supper, too, matters felt uncomfortable, even though the society at Chichikov's table was exceedingly agreeable, and Nozdrev had been removed, owing to the fact that the ladies had found his conduct too scandalous to be borne, now that the delinquent had taken to seating himself on the floor and plucking at the skirts of passing lady dancers. As I say, therefore, Chichikov found the situation not a little awkward, and eventually put an end to it by leaving the supper-room before the meal was over, and long before the hour when usually he returned to the inn. In his little room, with its door of communication blocked with a wardrobe, his frame of mind remained as uncomfortable as the chair in which he was seated. His heart ached with a dull, unpleasant sensation, with a sort of oppressive emptiness. "The devil take those who first invented balls," was his reflection. "Who derives any real pleasure from them? In this province there exists want and scarcity everywhere, yet folk go in for balls. How absurd, too, were those overdressed women! One of them must have had 1,000 roubles on her back, and all acquired at the expense of the overtaxed peasant, or, worse still, at that of the conscience of her neighbor. Yes, we all know why bribes are accepted, and why men become crooked in soul. It is all done to provide wives, yes, may the pit swallow them up, with fal-lals. And for what purpose? That some woman may not have to reproach her husband with the fact that, say, the postmaster's wife is wearing a better dress than she is, a dress which has cost 1,000 roubles. Balls and gaiety is the constant cry, yet what folly balls are! They do not consort with the Russian spirit and genius, and the devil only knows why we have them. A grown middle-aged man, a man dressed in black and looking as stiff as a poker, suddenly takes the floor and begins shuffling his feet about, while another man, even though conversing with a companion on important business, will the while keep capering to right and left like a billy-goat. Mimicry, sheer mimicry. The fact that the Frenchman is at 40 precisely what he was at 15 leads us to imagine that we too, forsooth, ought to be the same. No, a ball leaves one feeling that one has done a wrong thing, so much so that one does not care even to think of it. It also leaves one's head perfectly empty, even as does the exertion of talking to a man of the world. A man of that kind chatters away and touches lightly upon every conceivable subject, and talks in smooth, fluent phrases which he has culled from books without grazing their substance. Whereas go and have a chat with a tradesman who knows at least one thing thoroughly and through the medium of experience, and see whether his conversation will not be worth more than the prattle of 1,000 chatterboxes. For what good does one get out of balls? Suppose that a competent writer would describe such a scene exactly as it stands. Why, even in a book, it would seem senseless, even as it certainly is in life. Are therefore such functions right or wrong? One would answer that the devil only knows, and then spit and close the book. Such were the unfavorable comments which Chichikov passed upon balls in general. With it all, however, there went a second source of dissatisfaction. That is to say, his principal grudge was not so much against the balls as against the fact that at this particular one he had been exposed. He had been made to disclose the circumstance that he had been playing a strange and ambiguous part. Of course, when he reviewed the contretemps in the light of pure reason, he could not but see that it mattered nothing, and that a few rude words were of no account now that the chief point had been attained. Yet man is an odd creature, and Chichikov actually felt pained by the cold shouldering administered to him by persons for whom he had not an atom of respect, and whose vanity